and space are both elements of art. Right, in this first image, the artist says this is not a pipe at the very bottom. And the reason why I wrote that on the painting is he would ask, you know, what is this? And they'd say, oh, it's a pipe. And he's like, no, this is not a pipe. This is actually a painting of a pipe. So how does this, you know, what does it have to do with the chapter? Well, you know, it looks like a pipe because he put the values in there, and it gives this illusion of space. And so that's how it's going to, you know, we're going to kind of learn from here going forward as to value and space. So first, I like this last definition where it says values dark and light as the tools for creating depth. And this is a little bit more broad than the one I'm going to show you in just a few minutes, but you've got your light source, and that light source, if you'll look at it creates a highlight at the very top. That's the lightest value. Then as we get further away from that value, the shadows get darker, and then when you get to that cast shadow at the bottom, it's very dark. Chiaroscuro is a Renaissance. I like that they titled it Light and Dark, but it's actually, it feels like it's so much more than that though, because they were just so distinct about it. As you can see, there's 5 distinct areas that they wanted to identify, which is highlight, light, core shadow, reflected light, and cast shadow. So now this sphere, you can tell it's a lot more complex because they have identified those things. We have the light source in the same place, but they're saying, hey, here's where the highlight is. And you can see it's the brightest. And as we get further away, we've got the light where it's still reaching on the sphere. Then we have the core shadow, which is the darkest, but it kind of appears to be a ring around it. And that's because where you see the reflected light, it's a little bit lighter than that core shadow because there's light that can come from the surface around the sphere and lighten it up. And then you have the cast shadow, which is really the darkest of all. And so here the artists, they were doing a study of a human figure. This is so much more complex than a round sphere because the body is organic. But I'm going to go ahead and move to this this slide because here you can see they concentrate on just her knee, and you can see on her knee, okay, the light source is coming from above. We can see where there's the light, the core shadow, the reflected light, and the cast shadow. And I think you might get kind of lost on where that is, but the cast shadow is on the fabric underneath her leg where it's really dark. Hatching and cross-hatching. So this is where the artist can use lines and how they treat them and overlap them to create the illusion of value as well. And now let's talk about the element space. How can an artist give us the illusion of space? We've talked about the second point with value and texture, but we're going to look at these 3. The first one I really want to concentrate on in space is relative placement. And it's illustrated in this particular painting. So relative placement is saying where's the foreground, where's the middle ground, and where's the background. And the foreground here is the 2 figures because they appear closest to us. The other 2 figures behind them are in the middle ground because we can tell since they're smaller and they're less detailed that they're pushed back further in space. And then the background is the river and the woods, and it also feels like because of size and placement that it is, you know, the farthest area from us, the viewer. And these are just the definitions for those. So here are the textures and overlap and value. I mean, there's actually several things that can give you this idea of what's closest. But you can tell that what's at the bottom is overlapping what's behind it. You know, it's in front of that mountain behind it. So that's a good indication of that. Sometimes we can use color. Here, the colors that are the brightest and most bold feel closer to us. And the colors that kind of recede are the ones that have maybe more white or black mixed in with that color, and it just makes it dull. And it pushes back further in space. Perspective. So we're going to really look at these 3, atmospheric, isometric, and linear. So in atmospheric, we can tell, okay, the first, I don't know, we could just say the Greek architecture, or maybe let's just say Parthenon. It is the largest, it's the clearest, and it overlaps another one. So that one's in the foreground, it's closest to us. Then the middle ground is all the way to the far right. It's the next to the largest, and it has the, next to the strongest color. And then you've got one behind it, which would also be the middle ground. And then the one in the smallest one in the far back would be, you could say it's the background, or if you don't want to and you still think that's middle ground, that's fine too. You could just say the sky is. But that's, all creating depth within this illustration. So in Asher's work, we can tell, okay, in this case, actually, the darker areas that are painted read closest to us, and that's because they place closer to us. There's some detail in the lighted areas, but they overlap the boulders. So then we go to the boulders, we see the two men that are talking. We can see that, the detail of the leaves. It's really beautiful painting. We've got that middle ground there. And the background is where you've got like this blanket of sun that just kind of covers over those mountains. We don't have details. We can't distinguish tree from tree. But we still know that it's mountains, and we understand that that's far back. That is the background spatially. Okay, so isometric, it meaning equal measure. And it's oftentimes used in China to imply depth. So this is kind of really closely connected to linear perspective, but you can see where if you look at the buildings, how they run parallel towards each other. They're not converging towards each other. All of those buildings really are the example for isometric. And it's even kind of breaking it down for you here. It's actually drawing out so you can see when I say side of the building, what I actually mean by that for this illustration. Okay, so now linear perspective. This one has a vanishing point. It can have 1, 2, or 3, maybe even more than 3, but we're not going to go there on that. Let's see, I want to use this one. So look at the tile in the painting and look at the tables. And if you were to draw a line connecting from, let's say we're talking about the tile where there's the diamonds, there's my mouse, and you were to go back, you can actually see a line appear, and it's going back. What the artist has done is used 1-point perspective. They have created, here's the horizon line, and you can actually quite see that through the window there, that is the landscape, there's a horizon there. But they take a ruler and they measure, okay, the edge of this table, the feet of the table, the pattern on the floor, even the molding, like in that archway, all of it, all those are going to converge to 1 point to create the illusion of depth, so it looks three-dimensional. And this is not too difficult to do. You could do this on, at home using some instructions or watching a YouTube video. It's really not that difficult. This is kind of similar to what I might do in class with some of my students in drawing. They create their horizon line, they locate where they want the vanishing point on the horizon line, and then they take that ruler and they just start making their building or bridge, road, whatever they're going to do. I do like Masaccio's example, so maybe I should just go back just for a sec. And in Masaccio's, he actually has the horizon here. The vanishing point is intentionally placed there. You can see how it's used. But the reason why he put it there is so that it's at eye level for most men. And when they would stand there at the wall and they looked up, it would actually feel three-dimensional to them. There's an optical illusion effect for it. 2-point perspective is used here. Here's how it works. Instead of 1 vanishing point, you have 2, and the converging lines can create where you don't just have the front, you've got the side view too, which is closer to real life. And then this is 3D. And if it's below the horizon line, it's called a bird's eye view, and if you take it and build something above it, then it's going to be what's called the frog's eye view. So the third vanishing point is not on the horizon line, but you can tell they're gonna. I mean, this one is more complex. Advanced drawing students struggle with that one, but it makes for great image work. Just so you can kind of see this here. Okay, foreshortening. This is where we're going to kind of wrap up. This one, if you look at this comic illustration, we can see that there's Superman. His hand is really big. It's large because it feels closest to the viewer. Now we know that he has feet, but we can't see it. And that's because the artist is creating the illusion of foreshortening, so it appears like he's flying towards us. And that's it.